Hi, everybody. I hope y'all are having a great week. This is going to be the third, fourth, I'm not sure, but it's just the latest installment in the weekly videos that I'm providing to help y'all make your way through the American Yawp. It's a little different than anything you've ever dealt with, as we were talking about. And so for this week's focus, it's going to be a little different than usual. I know a lot of feedback I was getting was that Professor Flager focuses for y'all a lot on specific things like names, dates, events, things like that. So this is going to be kind of geared more towards teaching y'all how to stay focused and how to kind of juggle a lot of names and dates and things that could easily get repetitive if you're not careful with your note taking and your reading habits. And so the first thing is reading. Luckily, there's like a kind of well-known time trick for studying. It's called the 50-10 split, where you want to take 1 hour and focus on, all whatever you're reading, and just really read deeply and interrogate the text and interact with it. And then you want to give yourself a 10-minute break, and you want to do that every time you read. It's 50-10, so 50 minutes on, 10-minute break, 50 minutes back on, 10-minute break. For however long you feel like you need to study. This kind of, it doesn't necessarily have to be 50-10. As long as you are chunking up your time, I think that's definitely going to help you kind of stay focused and keep your notes well organized. Another big thing I would suggest is, if no one has yet, definitely find a good place to work. Your bed does not count as a good place to work. I know some people prefer quiet, some people prefer loud, whatever works for you, but no matter what, never choose your bed. You think you can stay focused there, but you cannot, I promise. Trust me. And so, reading-wise, the first thing I want you guys to do, to look for, is go to the intro. Already, like literally the first sentence, you have an event. Like I always say before, if something is important enough to start a paragraph with, it's important enough to take note of. So World War I, the Great War, that's going to be something this chapter is clearly looking into, and that's something you should take note of. Created these new nations, sparked tensions. I would look at what nations it created, what tensions it sparked. That obviously that is going to be very impactful for world history, really, not even just American history. Gruesome. And so, yes, this kind of gives you just a general idea of what major events / countries will be discussed in the chapter. And my next piece of advice is right after you read the intro, read the conclusion. Ideally, these two sections are going to hold an author's kind of key ideas, key elements, big events, important people. These two chapters are going to discuss all of this. And by reading this last section, you want to see how, throughout, as the chapter progresses, you want to see how these things that are mentioned in this conclusion are brought out. So you want to see World War decimated. So it's going to be talking about the Bolshevik Revolution, the Soviet Union, and the Cold War, and these things are all kind of connected, and I would definitely note them as important factors of this chapter because they are mentioned in the introduction. And we can assume that the Soviet Union might be this new country, quote unquote, that World War I was somewhat responsible for making. Middle Eastern nations. These new Middle Eastern nations that were created, these ethnic tensions that were stoked, these are all things that you want to be looking at. These are telling you kind of the impacts of World War I, which is certainly going to be what y'all are discussing in a class about World War I. So yeah, I would look at those two sections. Like I said, any major events, or any countries listed, any conflicts, any regions, things like that. Uh, as the chapter unfolds, I would be kind of keeping a lookout for all of that. And that kind of how to keep a lookout for that. I guess we'll go on to the next tip, which is read in chunks. So I would say, let's see, America Enters the War, for instance, section 5 or section 4. Even this is a pretty big section, guys. I would maybe half this. I would take half of this and read and then summarize, and then I would go on to the next half and summarize. And then I would kind of combine those two and look at that. And once again, any name such as Webb Dubois, you really want to take note of those people. But yes, so I would definitely read in chunks. That helps you stay more focused by kind of giving you a smaller amount of data to absorb. And because of that, your notes are going to be a lot more organized and a lot more clear. And speaking of organized and clear, if you can, make sure you highlight, make sure you annotate, and then margins right here. If you have something like Hypothesis, you can do this on the web. This is the app I think I talked about in our first video, where it kind of lets you annotate anywhere, any website, you don't need to have an open Word doc or anything. Or if you don't want to get Hypothesis, you could easily just open up a Word doc and do a split screen. Or you could have like an old school notepad out or something. But you guys, especially for something like history, you need to take notes, detailed ones. And so whatever you would normally highlight, if you don't have Hypothesis, I would highlight it and write that down in your Word doc or on your notebook or something like that. I would just take note of these things. Some kind of note taking is always needed. And as you're reading these sections, these chunks of a section, this half a section right here, for instance, always be asking yourself, where are these things it was talking about in the conclusion? Where are these things it was talking about in the conclusion? Where are these things that were mentioned in the intro, right? These are all things that you want to be asking yourself, what am I really reading? What is this about? In big picture sense, right? That's kind of how I would make my way through this chapter. And through really all the chapters from here on out. But yeah, and always wonder, this kind of ties to what I just said. Always wonder how the conclusion, how this connects to the entire chapter or section. That's very important. But yes, if you guys think of any tips that you would need on certain parts of reading, definitely be sure to write them down, shoot me an email. I'd love to help, and I will see y'all soon. Have a good week.